Welcome again to the That's My Dad podcast. I'm Scott Hilton. Got my buddy Jeff Wall in the studio with me. This is this is interesting because we set out, Jeff, to do 50 interviews, 50 podcasts. You're number 49.
Awesome.
And it's fitting. We've been friends since ninth grade. You've got quite a story, and I had a purpose. And, you know, I didn't bring on all my friends. I know some people think I only had 3 or 4 and I brought them all, but I didn't bring on all my friends, but I brought on the guys who I felt like really had a unique story, and you've got a really unique story, and it's something I think will help a lot of people. And the 50th interview is going to be a little different. We're going to kind of be a recap. So this is the last actual interview, and it's fitting that I would bring on somebody that I'm really close to. So, Jeff, you had quite an interesting story. You're one of 8 kids.
It's number 6 of 8.
Yeah, we met when we were in the 9th grade, and I did not realize what you had just gone through when we met. So let me just take us back to your childhood and walk me through that process.
Okay, well, apparently when I was young, I would take Mom out of the bed and sleep with him. So, I mean, me and my dad was pretty close. I felt like me and him had a special relationship. When he started driving a truck, he would like go to Chattanooga, Mississippi, different places like that, delivering parts. And on Saturdays, a lot of Saturdays, or during the summer, I'd ride with him. So, I felt pretty special for him.
And you guys had a pretty normal family. You played Little League ball.
Yeah.
There's an interesting story, too, I want us to tell about about Little League, but we'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah.
But you had a pretty normal life. Your dad worked. Your mom took care of y'all. You had a close family, and then things kind of fell apart in the 9th grade. Tell us what happened.
Well, when my dad started having chest pains, and he had a massive heart attack, and he was unable to work. So then we had to move from where we were living at, moved over to Emma Sansom Projects. Then his conditions just steadily started getting worse. And then he had a massive heart attack, went back into the hospital, stayed in there for a while, then had a blood clot, and then he passed. I was at the hospital when he passed. And that's one of the issues that I've had hard for a long time, because me and Mother was the last 2 to see him, and we went in there, and, I was 16 years old, and, I told him bye and everything. We had to leave. He said, "I loved you." Well, normally I tell him I, love him back, but I didn't this time, and that was the last time I saw him.
Mm. And then you weren't expecting him to.
No, Dad was strong. Dad was a mule. I didn't. He just survived massive heart attacks. I thought he was indestructible.
Yeah. So you thought I'll just come back.
I'll come back next time I see. Yeah.
And then I believe I remember you telling me that at the funeral home it took you.
Oh, God.
Tell us about that experience.
Well, I was with my Uncle Rudolph. He was walking us down the hall, and I was like, "Yeah, I got this. I was a tough 16-year-old. And I rounded the corner. I saw the flag draping the casket, and I broke down. I couldn't go up there. It took me 3 hours to go up there and see him in the casket.
Yeah, he was in the Navy, so
he
had
was in the Navy,
had a military funeral.
And I had a dream the night before that he had a pulse in his wrist. So by the time I went up there, I checked. I stuck my hand in there on it just to see,
Well, what can you describe what that's like for a 16-year-old kid
it's hard
to have to go through?
I mean, it's hard. I mean, like I said, I had 8 or 7 siblings. So they, we bonded, stuck together. But losing Dad was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do.
Have you ever wondered what your life would have been like had he lived? Would it have been different?
I don't know that it would have been different. I mean, Dad was Dad was hard growing up. You know, I ain't gonna say he was the perfect dad, but he was somewhat of a provider. But you know, he was hard.
Yeah. Yeah, so it wasn't a perfect home.
No. I know.
And then y'all, when we met, you were living in the housing project,
Yeah.
public housing projects. I guess I'd forgotten until we did the podcast how much time I spent in the projects, because I remember being over there. What was it like in those coming 3 or 4 years to have to? Well, first of all, you didn't tell anybody.
No. Actually, I ain't gonna say I got in trouble, but Miss Watkins pulled me off to the side when I come back to school and told me that I should have told somebody, but I didn't know what the protocol was.
Yeah. So you were at the hospital. He died. Mm-hmm. You went back to school and nobody knew.
I went back. I stayed out about 4 or 5 days. Then I went back to school. Yeah.
Yeah.
Then they wanted to know why I was out of school. I told them.
Yeah, and you didn't even tell your friends.
Mm-mm.
I didn't even know. To be honest with you, I never met your dad.
Yeah.
Because he was sick the whole time.
Yeah.
And when he died, you didn't even tell me. What was up with that? What was going on?
I didn't know what the protocol was on a situation like that, because he was actually the first family member I had that died. I mean, my grandmothers, they were all living. He was the first person that I knew that died.
Yeah, but
so
your dad,
the protocol was.
Your dad. I want to get back to that story when you played Little League. He was a defender.
Yeah.
Of you. Tell us that story of what happened there in the Little League.
Well, when I played Little League, you know, you have to sign those contracts. And apparently those contracts are legit. And we'd had a practice game before the season started, and I had a terrible practice. I mean, I couldn't catch anything on third. I couldn't hit anything. And one of the assistant coaches got mad at me, and he said, "You ought to just go play for Woods Brothers." That ticked me off. You know?
It was another team.
Yeah, another team. And I said, all right. So me and Craig, went home, told Daddy what he said, and the next day Daddy took us up there to Woods Brothers and told Mr. Bailey, said, "Hey, they don't want Jeff to play over there. Can he play here?" Mr. Bailey said, "Heck yeah." So I started practicing with them a couple of days, and there's a big stink up at the Little League.
Mm-hmm.
You know. They had a meeting, had the president of the league up there and different coaches that come up there, and they was discussing the situation about, you know, well, he signed a contract. This contract, he's supposed to play with this team. And Dad said something about the coach, he didn't think that he ought to be coaching the Little League, and he got up. He got up to, I guess, defend himself, but he attacked my dad, and Dad took him out.
Yeah, I remember.
You know?
So your dad kind of stood up for you is what he was doing. That's the whole point why I wanted you to tell the story. Your dad was a defender of his kids, and you told me something I remember, that he would take you on those truck rides, and y'all would stop and buy a loaf of bread.
And ham and cheese.
Some ham and cheese. Isn't it funny the things you remember that are so simple? With 8 kids, it wasn't like y'all had a whole lot of money.
Right.
So I don't think y'all went to Disney World very often, did you?
I had never. First time I went to Panama City, my sister Sharon took me. It was at graduation.
Yeah, at high school graduation. Yeah. But y'all were a pretty happy family.
Yeah. I mean, you know, we had our issues, you know. Dad, I would say he's an alcoholic, you know. I ain't gonna say it was the perfect world, you know.
Yeah.
But he was a provider, you know.
And he did take time with you.
Yeah. I mean, he worked a lot, you know.
Yeah. So what?
He went to all our games and stuff like that. You know, Mother and Daddy went to all our games. So
they were supportive. He had his issues, and I think that's a message, because there's a lot of families out there that are like that. You know, they don't have their act completely together. Yeah. We've had a lot of guys on the podcast who've just been like the perfect little family. But the point that I'm getting to is you came up in a situation where your dad wasn't an alcoholic, but he cared about you and he loved you, and y'all weren't abused. He spent some time with you.
Yeah.
But all that being said, you turned out to be a great dad for your 2 kids. And your dad instilled that.
Yeah.
And you told you that. That's something I've always noticed about you. You also made a comment that I heard one time. We're going to talk about your kids in a minute. But you said the difference between people who make good dads and the ones that don't make good dads is one thing: selfishness.
Yeah.
Well, tell us about that.
Well, if you're selfish, it's a me, I. You know, if you're selfish, you feel like you have to make sacrifices to do things.
So you have 2 very well-adjusted, responsible adult children now.
I think so.
And who really think highly of you. And I think the reason I wanted to have you on the podcast is because you did have a rough time coming up. You did, there were some issues at home, and then your dad did die, and then you had to live without a dad, and then y'all didn't have a whole lot materially. But somewhere along the line, you figured out how to be a great dad for your kids. So was there a point in time that you think that happened, or would it just evolve, or how did you roll into that?
Well, I think it just evolved. I mean, once again, it's choices. If you was raised in a bad situation, had abusive parents, and once you have your kids or you're thinking on having kids, if you thought the situation you was in was bad, then you should know how to avoid it.
Mm-hmm. So tell us about your kids, first of all.
Well, Savannah's 30. She's a nurse. I think she's an outstanding nurse. She works with hospice. She has a caring heart, so I think that's a calling, and she's very well at it. Scott's he's already went through his 2nd year at Jacksonville State with the Marching Southerners. Very musically inclined, very well. They were both different raising. I had to eat a lot of crow when we was raising Savannah with some friends of ours. They had 2 boys, Bob and Tammy. They had 2 boys, and Savannah, I'd snap my finger and get her in line, and they would be, a little more difficult. And they said, well, the boys are different. I said, no, it ain't just raising. You just got to blah, blah, blah. You just got to do this. You got to do that. And they said, no, boys are different. I said, no, they ain't. Well, then Scott was born. I had to eat them words.
You had to find out.
Yeah, they are different.
Different approach.
Yeah.
Scott is he's a musician, a singer, and was a drum major in high school.
Yeah, in the South Side, yeah.
At the local high school. And you never missed a game, I don't believe.
No, because I was able to retire early from Honda his junior year. And I didn't miss none of his senior year. I had to miss a few his junior year. That's because, work and whatever, but his senior year I got to see all of his senior year.
Yeah, and you had to give up something to be able to do that. I think Honda offered you some kind of deal if you would stay on, and you said, no, I'm not going to miss my kids' ball games.
Yeah.
He was the drum major.
Yeah.
And so you gave up a pretty big financial package to be able to do that. And that goes back to the thing you said about you can't be selfish in raising your kids. So for that young guy who's just lost his dad, you would say it's going to be tough.
It's going to be, it's going to be tough. You just give it time. You'll hurt. You'll cry. But then you'll start remembering things. Then you'll have the good memories, and a lot of the bad things will go away. But then you'll be able to talk about them.
Yeah. So time does help.
Time heals. Yeah.
But you're still, the pain doesn't go away.
No,
you still miss your dad.
I miss them. I think about my mother and dad every day. Like I said, the only regret that I have is when he told me he loved me and I didn't tell him I loved him back.
Wow.
And I think you was probably the first one I ever told that to.
Yeah, I remember that. So what do you think you and Sheila, you've been married 30 years?
32, fixing to be 33.
33 years.
Mm-hmm.
to the same woman.
Yes.
That's unusual. That's good. What do you think y'all have done right to raise the kids that have turned out like your kids have turned out?
Well, we've disciplined, you know, but I have learned you don't discipline when you're angry. Explain to them the reason you're disciplined,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have to fulfill your discipline. You have to do the discipline. Sheila was very good at making sure they did their schoolwork. You know, she's the reason that where they are now on their schoolwork. Because if it would have been up to me, I'd be like, well, you had a project to do, you should have done it. You know, she was on them about the project. You got to get this done. You got to get this done.
Yeah, and so is it really complicated to be a good dad?
I don't think so. If you assume I'm a good dad, I mean
I think you are. I mean, I've watched you. Yeah. You can't, like I said, you can't be selfish. I wouldn't have invited you to be on my podcast if I didn't think you were a good dad.
I mean, if you're a selfish person, if you're a I person, then it's going to be tough for you.
So it's really just as simple as that.
That's the way I've always looked at it. I mean, you got to provide for your family. I mean, that's a big step to be a mom or be a dad, and you have to be a provider, a protector, educator. You know, I don't know that I've taught them anything special. I've just taught them life. You know.
Mm-hmm. Have you talked to them much about your upbringing and things you went through?
Nah, not a lot. No.
Yeah, I'm just curious.
No.
So is there anything that they're going to learn from this interview that they didn't know, you think? That happens sometimes.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, there may be. I might get some questions asked.
Yeah, they may not have known what you went through as a kid.
I mean, but I'll tell them, you know.
Yeah. What would you want your kids to say about you when you're gone?
That I was a provider, that I wasn't hard on them, but I was a disciplinarian, that I loved them, that they knew I loved them.
What is the best way to show your kids you love them?
Tell them. I mean, I get off the phone there. I don't care if I've talked to them 10 times a day. Love you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I ain't going to do that again.
Yeah. Wow. Now here's a guy. You're kind of what we call a script flipper. A guy whose dad had alcohol issues. Although I'm going to say it sounds like he managed a little better than a lot of them do.
Yeah.
Large family. Y'all were poor.
Mm-hmm.
I know you've never said you were poor, and you don't want me to say you were poor, but you've never made that an issue.
No, I mean, as long as I'm able to eat, I'm good. You know?
But I mean, there's 80 y'all, there's a lot of mouths to feed.
Yeah.
You grew up in the public housing, and yet you've figured out a way to turn things around. You've got a daughter that's a nurse. You got a son that's going to be a band director one day. And both very successful. And when I say successful, not just career-wise, but in the way they handle themselves, the people they are, the way they treat people.
Yeah.
And, Jeff, you've always treated people kindly. I know anytime we've gone out to eat, people always come over and talk to you. And you've always treated people with respect. I think that's important. And you've modeled that for your kids, and they've taken and done that themselves. So I think your story is something that there's a kid out there that needs to see you, and they need to see that it can be turned around.
Yeah,
you know, you can turn it around, and you can have a good life, and you just can't be selfish.
It's choices.
It's all about your choices that you make.
Yeah.
Well, we've got a little video from your kids. We want to share this with you as we close.
Make me cry.
Hey, Dad. We just want to make this video to tell you how much we are blessed to have you as our dad. One thing that I'm grateful for is how much you have sacrificed for the both of us, even for whether that be taking off work or even having to miss some stuff because we were low on money or that you needed to really work. And we love you. And one of my favorite memories that we've had was when we were in Panama City and we took the banana boat ride.
Oh.
And how you had fell off the seat and you were struggling to stay on board, and I was trying to flag down the jet skier, and he just said, just stay down there, you'll be fine. And Mama was just laughing back on shore, and we were waddling, getting back to our canopy. But
That's funny.
it may have been a horrible day for you. It was a horrible day for you, but it was a pretty funny looking back on it.
I'm thankful for all the times that you were just there in my life. All the things that anytime I look back on, you're there. Whether you had to take off work, I remember you'd always get our band schedules and look and see what day and what shift you were on, so that if you had to take off work, you could put in PTO time. And that always means a lot to me. I'll just thank you for everything that you do now, and that you're always there for us even today when I'm married and have my own family. And I just want to thank you for all that you've done in my life. I love you.
Love you, Dad.
So coming out of the situation you came out of, you've never made a big deal of it. I'm probably making a bigger deal of it than you would like to. But how does it feel to know that you've came out of a situation that it would have messed a lot of people up, and you've done things right. You've not been selfish, and to have these kids now as adults to look at you and say, "Hey, Dad, we love you, appreciate you. We've recognized everything you've done." Is it worth it? Has it been worth it to you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm very proud of my kids. I mean, man, I think me and Sheila's done, they're very successful, and I'm just extremely proud of them.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted to have you on, because it just shows that parenting, and I think this would summarize the whole thing, being a dad's not complicated.
No.
And regardless of where you came from, what you've been through, if you're just not selfish, and you're just willing to make some sacrifices for your kids and just love them, I think that's one of the greatest things your dad taught you, is you're not any better than anybody else, but nobody else is better than you either.
And I've instilled that into my children.
One last thing, what would you say to your dad?
Oh, love you. That's the first thing I tell him, because I didn't get to tell him that before he passed.
Wow. Well, thanks for being on.
Well, sure, no problem, brother.
It's going to inspire somebody. Wow, it's time to end the final interview of the season, guys. Next week we've got a special thing coming up. But one of the things that I was thinking about in preparation for next week is one of the things we're going to talk about is the impressions that I've gotten from interviewing 50 people now.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that I got from you tonight, that I've gotten from everybody, is being a dad is not hard. It's not complicated. It's something that anybody can do. And just like you said, it's a matter of choice. So I think if we can say anything to the young guys out there, make a choice to be like Jeff. Just make a choice, and you can do it. It's not complicated. Over and over and over, the guys have told me this is not a complicated thing. To be a great dad, it's not complicated. So I think that's a good summary of your life, and I appreciate what you've done. Thanks for coming on. That'll conclude this episode of That's My Dad, where we're inspiring fathers to be great dads, and we're breaking cycles of generational fatherlessness. See you next week.